so proud to be the face of the Democrats tonight.
I can handle all the bigotry and all the grief in the world to know that I'm supporting people in a marginalized community. And it's not just about the transgender community, it's not just about the LGBT community, it's about all marginalized communities.
The more time we spent kind of debating any one individual person or figure is less time that we spend talking about Medicare for all, tuition-free public college, and a Green New Deal.
I actually believe that Florida and its rich diversity are going to be looking for a governor who's going to bring us together, not divide us, not misogynists, not racists, not bigots. They're going to be looking for a governor who is going to appeal to our higher aspirations as a state.
We need to oppose Donald Trump, not just with rhetoric, but with policy.
My opponent lives in the world of fiction. I live in the world of fact. Let's just do a few facts, okay? The subway system is owned by New York City. The subway
MTA has been controlled by the state since 1965.
Can you stop interrupting? Can you stop interrupting?
Can you stop lying?
We are trying to create a state of excellent schools with jobs that create wealth and opportunity, with good leaders who stand up for all of us. I will be the governor who brings more than jobs to Georgia. Together we can build career pipelines in renewable energy, spur creativity. We can spur creativity through a growing entertainment industry, and we can increase the strength of our trade unions to grow an economy that lifts every Georgian.
Peaceful, nonviolent protests, including taking a knee at a football game to point out that black men, unarmed, black teenagers, unarmed, and black children, unarmed, are being killed at a frightening level right now, including by members of law enforcement, without accountability and without justice. And this problem, as grave as it is not going to fix itself. And they're frustrated, frankly, with people like me and those in positions of public trust and power who have been unable to resolve this or bring justice for what has been done and to stop it from continuing to happen in this country. And I can think of nothing more American than to peacefully stand up or take a knee for your rights anytime, anywhere, any place.
Folks, you have just seen the new face of the Democratic Party. I'm Barry Gordon. This is NewsRap, live at 5. Those of you who have seen this show before know that I don't usually sit at the middle of the desk. I usually sit over there, and my partner, Andre Coleman, sits over there. The reason I am in the middle of the desk is because I found out today, shortly before the show, that my partner, Andre Coleman, is not going to be with us today. For personal reasons, he's not able to come down and do the show. But we're not going to leave you in the lurch. So we're doing the show anyway, and right now it's you and me. Now, I have some more interesting news for you. You can't call in today. We're having an issue with the phones. We've been having it for about a week now. And we're trying to get parts, I think, or something, or batteries for the phone. And apparently, I don't know, UPS is moving very slowly.
Yes.
And so, but we will have them, because this is a show where we want your participation. But we can still get your participation, because if you go to Facebook and go to the Pasadena Media Facebook page, you will find us as a live stream, of course, and you can chat there. You can ask a question or a comment, make a comment, and our wonderful, intrepid producer, Danielle, will tell me what's going on, and I'll be able to actually answer you. And that's how we're going to have a real conversation today. But there are a lot of things to talk about, and I guess the thing that's most on my mind is this idea of partisanship. And the reason it's on my mind is that, first of all, the Democrats, as you saw, are starting to look toward a new generation. They're starting to look toward people who care deeply about values. They're not willing to play the what I call the consultant's game. And I call it the consultant's game because once upon a time, a very long time ago, I actually ran for office, and I had consultants. And they're the experts that kind of tell a candidate what they can and can't do, mostly what they can't do. And what I discovered was that consultants, and they're great people, they're nice people, I'm not trashing them as human beings at all, but they are very conservative with a small c. And what that means is that even if they're Democratic consultants, even if they're Democratic liberal consultants, you kind of have a list of do's or don'ts. Certain things you can say, certain things you can't say, because what they tell you as a candidate is that if you say certain things, you can't get elected. And I was resistant to that, but in the end, I kind of played along with it because I figured they knew a lot more than I did, being a first-time candidate. And I found it very inhibiting. I found it very restrictive. And a lot of the time I was uncomfortable because I wasn't able to just get out there and say what I felt. This was at a time, for example, when the issue of marriage equality, which thankfully is no longer an issue, thanks to the Supreme Court, amazingly, but the issue of marriage equality was a taboo subject. You weren't supposed to talk about it. And I actually had a private meeting, a meet and greet, and I said some things about marriage equality. And having been trained as a lawyer and practicing briefly as a lawyer, I said, I think it's a constitutional issue. I think that it's what's called an equal protection issue. And actually, that's how the Supreme Court ultimately ruled, was that it was an equal protection issue, and that to prevent marriage equality was unconstitutional. And I said that in private at a meet and greet. Today, that would have probably gotten onto an iPhone or a Galaxy and gotten out to the airwaves, and it wouldn't have stayed private. But at that time, the consultant was able to kind of say, well, no, we don't talk about that. We're not going to talk about that as part of the campaign. And I didn't. And I'm embarrassed a little bit when I think back that I didn't. So what I'm happy to see is a group of candidates who are pushing against the tradition, pushing against the advice that consultants will give you, because the consultants are part of the establishment. They only know how campaigns have been won in the past. And I believe we're reaching a tipping point. I think that campaigns are going to be won differently in the future. They certainly were won differently in 2016, because no one could have predicted the kind of campaign that Donald Trump ran. I hope that that's not the future. I hope that's not the direction we go in. But there is something, the other candidate that was very popular and also one that everyone said could not win, and did not win was Bernie Sanders. And what Bernie had, I think a lot more than Trump, because I think Trump is a huckster. I think he's a con man. I know that everyone talked about his authenticity, but I don't think he has an authentic bone in his body. But Bernie Sanders does. And like what he stands for or don't like what he stands for, Bernie was the real deal. And there are others who are the real deal. Elizabeth Warren is the real deal. I think Joe Biden, in many ways, is a real deal. And all of the people that you saw in that opening package are the real deal, I think. And I would like to see that become the new wave of the Democratic Party. And so what I'll be watching for in November is whether these folks can win. I mean, Beto O'Rourke is in a tough, tough race, running against Ted Cruz. Texas has been solidly Republican, but things are changing. Demographics are changing. The populations of these states are changing. Arizona has moved from red to purple. Texas may move from red to purple. And I can't read that. Can you come a little bit closer for me? So I hope that these folks win. I think Stacey Abrams can win in Georgia. I'm not sure about Cynthia Nixon because she's running against someone who basically packages himself as a progressive. And so it's kind of progressive light against real progressive or progressive heavy. That's a different situation than a Ted Cruz, Beto O'Rourke kind of race. But, you know, with Ocasio-Cortez winning the primary in New York, there are a lot of opportunities for a new generation, a new look, a new face that feels like the real America. And I hope that we move in that direction. I think we have a comment, actually, a Facebook comment. Danielle, are you reading it or is it coming up on my teleprompter?
Yeah, I can read it.
Okay, come closer to the microphone.
So Scott Shepard, ABC's. Scott Shepard asked, what do you think about what happened in South Pasadena today? I just had to look it up.
I didn't know.
No, I didn't. So it's on the preview there, and it looks like a woman was shot and killed by the South Pasadena police. She was an actress on the TV show ER, but it goes back to...
Yes, I did not realize that this happened in South Pasadena, but before I left the house, I did see this break actually on the entertainment trade paper on Daily Variety, and I did get a bulletin about Vanessa Marquez is her name. And I did not realize that this happened in South Pasadena, but I did read the headline. I don't know what the circumstances are. Danielle, can you fill us in?
Yeah, so apparently she had some mental issues, and the police have been out a number of times to
Can you come closer to the mic?
Sorry about that.
It's just really tough to hear.
Yeah, so apparently it looks like she was mentally unstable, and the police have been out to her house several times. This is based on ABC's news reporting. And she became combative and waving a BB gun around at officers.
Oh, that's a stupid thing to do.
Yes, so that's the reporting as of now.
Okay, so that's sad, but that was, dumb. That was really dumb to do. Let me shift gears a little bit, because the people that we're looking at, there's also been a lot of conversation actually today and for the last several days with the passing of Senator John McCain, There's been a lot of talk again about bipartisanship. Most TV journalists love bipartisanship. You'll hear them say all of the time, wouldn't it be great if we could go back to a time when things were bipartisan, when everyone worked across the aisle? And I've always given that a lot of thought. And where I've come down on that is, no, that would not necessarily be great. And the reason I don't think it's necessarily great is because we have parties right now, Republican Party and a Democratic Party, that share very little in common in terms of values. And I could go into the history of how that happened. Most of it happened because we used to have a Democratic Party that had a spectrum from all the way over to, from the left, close to being a socialist, to the right, which mostly were Southern racists. And we at one time were the anti-civil rights party. Once we became a pro-civil rights party, a lot of those folks on the right left the fold, and former Southern Democrats became Southern Republicans. And so you didn't have as much of a division within the parties. And so the parties started to split ideologically. You found a Democratic Party that was left of center, and you found a Republican Party that at one point was right of center. Now I would actually argue it's right, or even ultra-right for the most part. And it was a place where McCain and Biden didn't necessarily fit in. So the point that I'm trying to make is that bipartisanship is not necessarily what we need. And I have a list of books that I'm going to write once I retire from teaching. And one of them is a book called Civil Partisanship, because I believe in partisanship. And because I believe in partisanship, that doesn't mean that I also believe in the brand of partisanship that particularly the Republican Party has been practicing, which is a very hateful, nasty, no-holds-barred kind of inability to even deal with the other side. And I have a comment from Dan, and he's saying, do you know what Gore Vidal said about our so-called two-party system? And you're going to tell me, right, Dan? So what did Gore Vidal say? I'm assuming it's a rhetorical question. So I'm going to let Dan tell me what was said. Oh, it's not rhetorical. Okay, so he actually wants to know if I know what Gore Vidal said about our so-called two-party system, and I probably don't, or I might know what was said, but I may not know that it was said by Gore Vidal. I mean, I know that I know Gore Vidal probably would have said there's not a dime's worth of difference between the two parties, or something like that. Now there's a massive difference between the two parties, so that really isn't relevant anymore. But what is missing is not bipartisanship, it's civility. And that point was laid out so well by Joe Biden when he spoke yesterday at the memorial service in Arizona for John McCain. Can we run that?
And I can remember the day when I came out to see John. We reminisced about it. It was in '96. And we were about to adjourn for what we call the caucuses. There's a luncheon once a week that all the Democratic senators have lunch together and all the Republican senators. And we both went into our caucus, and coincidentally, we were approached by our caucus leaders with the same thing. It was raised as a discussion. Joe, it doesn't look good you sit next to John all the time on there. Swear to God. Same thing was said to John in your caucus. That's when things began to change for the worse in America. It was always appropriate to challenge another senator's judgment, but never appropriate to challenge their motive. When you challenge their motive, it's impossible to get to go. If I say you're doing this because you're being paid off, if I say you're doing this because you're not a good Christian, if I say you're doing this because you're this, that, or the other thing, it's impossible to reach consensus. But all we do today is attack the oppositions in both parties, their motives. The last day, John was on the Senate floor. What was he fighting to do? He was fighting to restore what we call regular order, to start to treat one another again like we used to.
And we're back. We got an interesting comment. It's a little cryptic, but we got an interesting comment from Pamela Royce. Our political system is evolving or trying to. I think the real question, Pamela, is it evolving or is it devolving?
Hey, what do you think? I mean, do you think it's in... I think what she was saying when it came up was in response to our two-party system. So in terms of evolving with these, the new face of the Democratic Party.
Right. I don't see the two-party system changing in the near future. I think if the two-party system does change, it's going to be because the Republican Party, as it currently is, gets so marginalized and so small that folks like John McCain or like John Kasich or, a bunch of other folks like that, probably a lot of Republicans in Pasadena, might seek a third party. And they might seek a centrist kind of a party. What that looks like, I have no idea. I have never really seen a strong centrist agenda come from anybody. So the fact is, right now, I think what we need is a strong counterpoint to what is clearly an ultra-conservative Republican Party. It's time for a strong counterpoint to that. I think we need to say to the American people, you've got two different parties with very, very different values. Which way are you going to go? And they're going to have to make up their minds. And did they make up their mind in 2016? I don't think so. Because as I said, I think it was a con job. I think a lot of people thought they were getting something very different in Donald Trump than they actually ended up getting. But now, I think we have to present a very, very solid, powerful case for progressivism. And, that's what Ronald Reagan realized about conservatism in 1980 when everyone was saying, oh, you've got to be more moderate. And he was saying, no, I don't. I'm just going to make the American people choose. And it's time for the American people to choose again. That's what it's time for. And we're giving them an opportunity with some of these fascinating, interesting, new candidates. And they'll have more of an opportunity in 2020 with maybe some old candidates like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden, and they're going to have to decide what they want. But, someone is saying, is that Pamela again? Saying, I'm not sure that forming a third party is practical. I think that's Pamela again, and I totally agree with that. I really don't think it is. And I don't necessarily think we need one. What do we need? If you listen to what these progressives are saying, and whether you label them as democratic socialists or Democrats or progressives, I don't care. It really doesn't matter. But all they're saying is that we need political will to change the conversation in this country. Right, Pamela? We need to change the way we think about guns. We need to change the way we think about health care. We need to change the way we think about our educational system. And now we have Democrats who are offering that change and aren't afraid to. And that's the fundamental difference, that they're not sitting there saying, you know, oh, I can't say this because my consultant is saying if I do, I won't get elected. And frankly, Danny O'Connor, who almost won the race in Ohio, I watched him on television, and he was not one of those new Democrats. He was afraid of making any powerful or affirmative statement. And I don't think you're going to win that way anymore, because I think the American people are fed up with it. I think they're tired of politics as usual. I think they're tired of people that are afraid to speak their mind. And now we've seen someone speaking his mind ever since he took office in an awful way. But there's a positive way where people can speak their minds. And that's why we wanted to open the show the way we did. We want to say that politics can be positive. It can represent something. It doesn't have to be wishy-washy. It doesn't have to be a fake bipartisan thing. It can be real, and it can have real consequences. And that's the only way that we're going to get people interested again.
All right, if they want to continue this conversation.
We're going to continue on Facebook. I'm Barry Gordon. I miss Andre Coleman so much. He'll be back with us next week. We're going to talk about SB 10 next week. You don't want to miss that. And we're going to Facebook.